everyone. I'm Mimi Chapman. I'm the president-elect for GADE. Our president, Denise Burnett, is having a little technical issue joining, but we want to make sure that we get started on time because we have an important topic to discuss today. Really happy that everybody is joining. We have a lot of participants today. We're also recording this meeting so that others can view it later. We will have a chance for some question and answer later on, which will sort of try and keep specific to doctoral education and how it affects our work as program directors for doctoral programs in particular. I am very happy to introduce my colleague, Hsun-Ta, who is an associate professor here at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He has been our liaison from the School of Social Work to a university level working group that has been working since last May, I believe, to think about best practices for using generative AI in both teaching and research. So he has been instrumental on our faculty in bringing us up to speed over the last 8 weeks since school started. And so I know I have absolutely no doubt that this presentation is going to be useful to everyone on this call as well. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Hsun-Ta.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I just want to test people can hear me. Great, thank you. So I will start sharing screens. And can you see my screens? Okay, great. So thank you very much for having me today for this presentation. And my topic is cruising through the territory of generative AI use in higher education, or I should say more specific, social work higher education. My understanding is that GADE is focusing on doctoral education, and our doctoral students, aside from learning, they're also conducting research and help us teaching, or even they're doing solo teaching. So for today's presentation, I would like to briefly cover what UNC as an institution has done to facilitate or promote ethical generative AI use in learning, teaching, and research. But just like many institutions, we're still learning throughout the process as we fully acknowledge that generative AI is rapidly evolving, and we want to make sure that we are nimble in a way that we can respond accordingly. I'm also going to go through how generative AI can be applied in different areas, for example, research and teaching, and also facilitate student learning. Finally, I will also cover potential ethical concerns and limitations of generative AI use. So first things first, what is generative AI and how is it different from traditional AI? Generative AI is a branch of AI that through applying large language modeling or LLM with the support of large data sets, it can create new and original content, human-like contents even. These contents can include music, papers, videos, and to be honest, sky is the limit. On the other hand, traditional AI or more machine learning that we were more familiar with, they usually follow preset rules with much narrower focus. For example, based on algorithms utilizing homeless management information system data to predict successful exit of homelessness. Generative AI, on the other hand, they really create new materials simply based on pieces of information that we give them, or the inputs we give them. These inputs are called prompts. For example, I can enter a prompt into a text-to-image AI tool to create an art piece that is a combination of art style. And here's the example. I used Bing Image Creator, and the prompt I enter is that create a Hakusai tsunami in Vermeer styles oil painting. And then I further modified it using the Microsoft Designer. And I'm not an artsy person, but based on my standard, that looks pretty good for me. With LLM and large language modeling and the sea of internet data, if used well, generative AI has enormous potential to streamline the process. And I want to highlight the process for us when we're talking about conducting research, carrying out teaching, and trying to facilitate our student learning. It can help us to brainstorm research questions, identify and develop engaging course activities, help us to develop lesson plans, or even generate presentation slides. But we are the ones who have the original ideas. We are the ones who's in charge of conducting our research, carrying our teaching duties, and our students are in charge of their own learning. So we should take the full responsibilities of carrying out those activities, not using generative AI as a tool to help us be more efficient rather than having them to replace us as an expert in those areas. So fully acknowledging the great potential of generative AI in our profession, in teaching and researching, the provost at UNC assembled the generative AI committee with representatives from each academic unit in the past summer to promote ethical use of generative AI among our stakeholders, including students, faculty members, and staff members on various areas, including teaching, learning, and research. The committee is also in charge of providing resources so that students, faculties, and staff can utilize in terms of using generative AI in the future. What the committee is not doing is to develop a university-wide generative AI policy. So we are very careful in that we're not using the term of policy, as we understand that different people may have very different comfort level when utilizing generative AI. And different research areas or different academic unit may have its own context, its own discipline context in terms of whether they're comfortable utilizing generative AI or not. So what we're doing is to support each academic unit to develop its own guidance. So throughout the summer, we have accomplished multiple deliverables based on what we are assigned to do. For example, we have developed and rolled out guidance, ethical generative AI usage guidance for students, instructors, and researchers. We recently also rolled out staff usage of generative AI guidance. We have developed training modules for both students and instructors. For students, trying to let them learn what is generative AI, how generative AI can boost up their learning experiences, and what may be the potential ethical concerns of generative AI. We also have trainings for instructors so that they can utilize or incorporate generative AI in their teaching, in their classroom, and also utilizing generative AI to boost up their trajectories in research and teaching. We have also developed supportive materials, for example, posters that we can post it in classrooms or in buildings, and we develop slides that can be incorporated in the first week of class so that instructors can convey AI usage with their students at the beginning of the semester. Considering the time constraints that we have today, I'll just go through a high-level philosophy of our guidance here. The first one is the student generative AI usage guidance, and the most important thing is that AI should help students learn, not learn for them. Students will need to take full responsibilities of their works and products in the classroom. This is just the guidance. Instructors' course policies will supersede this guidance. For example, if I choose not to let my students use any generative AI tools in my class, I include it in my syllabus, I convey it to my students. Students cannot simply just say that, well, there's a generative AI usage guidance, so I can still utilize generative AI in this class. No, students will need to follow instructors' policies, specific policies in terms of whether generative AI and to what extent generative AI can be used in that specific course. And to ensure accountability and transparency, students' use of generative AI should be well documented and open to instructors. We've actually created a format for that, which I'm going to talk about later. Finally, students should be cautious in terms of what information they put into the generative AI tools. Try not to put in confidential or personal information into AI tools, as whatever we input in ChatGPT, it can be utilized for further training of the AI tool. So in a sense, it's entered into public domain. So that's something that we'll need to be very cautious of. Teaching guidance is very similar to student guidance. Again, instructors should take full responsibilities in terms of their course activities and materials. AI should help us to become a better teacher or educator, not teach for us. AI can be very helpful to generate course slides, come up with quizzes with answers, save us a lot of time, or provide comments on students' work. But if we're utilizing generative AI in our classes, in our course, we should document it, and we should communicate actively with our students in terms of what AI tools have been used, why we're using it, to what degree, and how utilizing generative AI tools can help students boost up their learning experiences. We need to take students' perceptions into consideration. So for example, will students feel comfortable if the course announcement that I provided or the email responses I provided are generated or supported by generative AI? Will they feel comfortable if the comments they received on their assignment is provided through generative AI? That's something we'll need to have transparent and active communication with our students. I think one thing we should also be cautious of is the potential disparities AI may create in student learning. For example, students with better financial resources may have access to ChatGPT 4, which is about $20 per month, significantly better than the free version, which is ChatGPT 3.5, which most students without enough financial resources may have access to. And that, in a sense, create a disparity in terms of learning based on the tools they are having access to. However, I also want to highlight the potential benefits in terms of addressing disparities in learning with generative AI. Previous literature has already demonstrated that people of color, LGBTQ plus populations, especially when we're talking about young adults or youth, they're especially savvy in terms of technology use, including smartphone usage and also social media engagement. If that trend can be translated or generalized to generative AI usage, then utilizing or incorporating generative AI tools in our courses can really help minority students or disenfranchised students to have the tutoring, to have the necessary tools to help them to boost up their learning experiences and address the disparities they are facing in terms when we're talking about higher education learning. So there are the opportunities and also challenges that both provided through generative AI. Again, do not simply just copy and paste student assignments onto generative AI tools just to get a grade or to get comments generated by the tools, as it might violate FERPA policies. Finally, stay informed as educators. Maybe not this year's students, but future generations students will be learning and utilizing generative AI tools growing up through their education process. And we should have ourselves more attentive to the use of generative AI, how to utilize it in schools, in classes, how students may utilize generative AI and what may be the potential concerns or adverse outcomes that generative AI tools may present. Very similar to the other two guidance, for research, as a researcher, we need to take 100% responsibilities of our research works, including proposals, papers, and presentations. Again, other rules may supersede the guidance provided here. There are a lot of, for example, HIPAA, FERPA rules will dictate in terms of to what level we can utilize generative AI and what kind of generative AI tools, what format we can utilize it. There are great heterogeneity among disciplines or research areas, so we should be familiar with the norms, guidelines, or policies in our own research areas, or specific journal guidelines in terms of how and whether to use generative AI. Again, stay informed and document and disclose AI usage in research for transparency and accountability. So I've already talked a lot about the documenting and be transparent in terms of generative AI use. And this is a format or template that created by the UNC committee. As you can see here, it's very easy to adapt by students, by instructors, by researchers in terms of what purpose we're using generative AI for, whether it's creating outlines, draft, or slides, and what tools we are using. Could be ChatGPT-4, Bard, so on and so forth. What may be our prompts that we give to the tool, and what may be the outputs, and to what degree we modify those outputs. This is an example of the faculty training module that the community developed. It includes 6 sessions or 6 modules, starting from generative AI introduction in the first module to using generative AI to boost trajectory in research and teaching as the last module. Each module includes own it, learn it, apply it, and share it components, which allow us to learn specific AI skills, practice it, and to give feedback and interact with the community. These modules do not require UNC accounts to access, so I'm posting the link here. The feedback we have is that people who took the training, even though they may not fill out or complete the exercises or quote unquote assignments, they found it really helpful. Simply just review the clips, video clips, and also the materials there, so that they can be more familiar with generative AI and incorporate generative AI in their profession. So I've already talked a lot about what our committee has done to promote ethical use of generative AI. So I'm going to start talking briefly about how generative AI can be utilized in different areas when we're talking about teaching, learning, research, teaching, and learning. So the first thing is using generative AI to polish our research questions. Usually the first step in any research project that we're trying to carry out is to identify the right research questions we would like to answer through our research. And sometimes we're not sure if the research questions have been answered or the hypothesis has been tested. In this case, generative AI can be very, very helpful in terms of helping us to analyze literature, synthesize findings across different studies, identify potential gaps and trends in the current literature. I'm going to talk more about utilizing generative AI in literature review in the later slides because it also applies to teaching, not just research. But one way I did find generative AI being extremely helpful is to serve as a really patient colleagues and or peers that I can bounce research question back and forth with. That's because the current generative AI tools will remember our interaction and our dialogue. So it will remember the context and allow us to ask follow-up questions so we can keep asking them for feedback on our research questions until a polished one or a final one is being developed. I would like to highlight that it's not on par currently, it's not on par as in face-to-face interaction with my colleagues, of course, because my colleagues are extremely smart and very nice. But noting that the current version of chatbots that we're seeing now is actually the worst version, as they are continuously improving in a rapid pace. So I think in the near future, we can utilize it fairly efficiently as a starting point when we're trying to brainstorm research questions. So here's an example. I am asking Cloud 2, which is a chatbot, more to give me some feedback on a more general research question. What may be the role social supports play in substance use among youth experiencing homelessness? And then based on their feedback, I ask a follow-up question. So you can see that Cloud 2 did give me bullet points of feedback. Some of them are very helpful. Some may not be as helpful based on my context. So I circle those helpful ones in blue. And based on their feedback, I ask the follow-up question. As you can see here, I don't need to ask repeated questions. I can simply just say, how about, and a revised question, are different social support sources impact heavy drinking among gender and sexual minority youth experiencing homelessness differently? And you can see it's able to understand what I'm saying and provide me with feedback. It actually starts with some compliments, really strength-based approach, really social worky pattern, and then follow up with some suggestions. And we can keep doing this on and on until we finalize our research question. Another thing that generative AI can be extremely helpful is for literature review and synthesis. So this applies not only to research, but also to our students' learning. In many classes, we would like our students, including doctoral students or MSW level students, to be able to conduct some sort of literature review or do some research on certain topics. And based on what we're asking them to do, generative AI can help us summarize either a journal article, a website, or synthesize research findings across different studies, including comparing and contrast different studies. Some tools can also help us identify research trends, gaps, come up with consensus, so on and so forth. Here are some tools that I found very helpful. Sadly, most of them are not truly free. Some do give us a token for us to use and will refresh in a certain time period, for example, a month. If we're not heavy users, that's going to be extremely helpful. Personally, I prefer SciSpace and Elicit, bolded here. SciSpace is good at summarizing a study, one study, and SciSpace also has a free Google Chrome extension called SciSpace Copilot. Basically, it allows you to instantly summarize a website or a PDF file and interact with the chatbot to ask questions that about the information included in the website. Elicit, on the other hand, is very good at summarizing multiple studies because it allows you to upload multiple PDF files at one time. Both tools allow us to conduct literature review and come up with consensus And I'm going to show you with an example here. So here is elicit. And the prompt I want to know is a list the effect of chatbots on reducing HIV risks. So you can see here, it found 60 papers based on my prompts. And of those 60 papers, I found 55 concepts. And it will automatically do some analysis. And they found 39 unique concepts. And here is their final answer. You can see that it gives you citations. It gives you this paper is more about, or this concept. Some people are using chatbot for medication adherence. Some are focusing on reduction in unprotected intercourse. Some are focusing on resource efficiency, facilitate access to HIV prevention and programs. So you can see here, it's very, very helpful to really synchronize multiple studies at one time and really think about what have been done and what may be the potential gap. So that's an example for utilizing elicit for use for literature review. Generative AI can also, when we're talking about academic writing and editing, generative AI can help us to simplify the writing process by generating outlines and revision suggestions. It's definitely violating academic integrity, and also I found it not very helpful to simply ask generative AI to write a paper or a proposal for us, even to ask them to write a draft. I know there are some books generated by AI sold on Amazon, and Amazon is actively removing those books. What generative AI can really help us in academic writing, again, is that it helps us to brainstorm. It can help us to generate some talking points, some guidelines, some contents we probably would like to include in a certain topic in our academic writing. It can also help us to format our papers or our materials so it can be abide by journal requirements. It can provide feedback or critiques to our own works so that we can prepare for potential peer reviewers' comments. So there's a fine line between asking generative AI to come up with a draft versus asking generative AI to critique your work so that you can be fully prepared. And that's something we want to be very careful about in terms of how we utilize generative AI in our academic trajectory. Always write our own papers and proposals. We know what our ideas are. We are the thinker here. Who we would like to convey our ideas to and what impacts we would like our work to create. So we should take the spearhead, or we should take the accountability of our works. So this is a big no-no in terms of what not to do. Don't ask generative AI to give you a draft for a certain topic. And it will provide you a draft based on what you're asking. I would say in a mad draft, it's not really helpful. And so I wouldn't encourage people to do that. But what generative AI can be extremely helpful is to help us to address the tedious part when we're thinking about academic writing. We all are far too familiar submitting manuscript to different journals because different journals may have different requirements. Some may ask for a cover letter, some may ask for specific word count, some may have different citation format. So generative AI can help us with that. In this example, I am asking generative AI that I want to submit a research brief, not a full paper, but research brief to the American Journal of Preventive Medicine. Could you provide me an example with necessary elements, for example, cover letter, title page, and please also include word limit. As you can see here, it provides me with a template of cover letter. It also gives me all the elements required in research brief required by the AJPA. It also gives me what are expected to be included in different elements, and also what may be the citation format, and what may be the word count for each element. So that will help me when I'm writing my paper in terms of, okay, I can simply just work from this format, so that makes my life easier. One thing that I found, and I'm actually amazed by generative AI, is that it can help us to come up with to help us to be more efficient in terms of presentation preparation, whether it's for conferences or it's for classes. I'm totally not an artsy person again, and my slides tend to be very bland, and I found myself spending too much time trying to find templates or pictures for my presentation. And generative AI can help me develop draft slides that I can improve upon. It can also provide me with critics and feedbacks on my own slides. It is especially helpful when combining different generative AI tools, so that it can help us to really develop a presentation almost automatically. So I'm sure that most of us, if not all of us, have received SWOR notification in terms of whether our abstracts are being accepted or not. And many of us probably are thinking about doing oral presentation in SWOR. So here's an example in terms of how using different types of generative AI can be helpful. So in this example, I'm using two generative AI tools. One is Cloud 2. So basically, I upload my open access paper, assuming that I'm going to present that onto Cloud 2. And I ask it, please provide slide-by-slide contents based on the PDF file that I just submitted. The total should be 6 slides. Each slide should have a title and 3 talking points. And if you can see here, you can see that it generates 6 slides with title, understanding firearm violence involvement among homeless young adults, method, results. So there's some errors that we definitely need to clean up, and then conclusions. So, and you can see I can upload my PDF file here. So one thing I want to highlight is that I only upload PDF files that are open access papers, and I'm also an author on it. The reason why is we are not quite sure in terms of whether we are allowed to upload PDF files or files that are behind the paywall if it's not an open access paper. So I will be extremely careful on this one. So my philosophy is that it's open access paper and it's already in public domain, then I will I feel more confident or comfortable uploading it to summarize it. So what I do is that I will copy the slide guidelines generated by it, and I go to a presentation tool called Gamma. So I create new and text transform, and I just simply copy and paste the guidelines here, and we can select what we would like it. So write in a professional, engaging tone with concise, persuasive language. So you can see that it will automatically fill in the blank. If the notes are missing info, add your own rich details, which I don't want. So I will delete it. And then let's see. We can choose whatever we want. For example, I like the mountains, and I will just say continue. And you can see that it's generating all the slides for me. And of course, I will need to do some modifications, but it really saved me a lot of time when I'm thinking about doing presentation. One thing I want to draw your attention on this is you can see potential biases of portraying through generative AI. Whenever I put into individuals experiencing homelessness, there's always going to be tents. There's always going to be people lying on the street. While when I'm my research with individuals experiencing homelessness, especially youth experiencing homelessness, they're actively engaging in whatever ways that can better their lives. They're actively engaged in community action board, and that part is not reflected through the tool. So I will definitely change the pictures included here. Again, we are the ones who have the ideas. We are the content experts. These are just a tool that can boost up our productivity, makes our life easier. Okay, let me go back to slideshow. And just like research, generative AI can also help us become a better teacher. And as shown before or discussed before, generative AI can be very helpful in brainstorming with us on potential contents that we should cover in our courses in specific sessions. It can help us develop syllabus and even lesson plans. Generative AI can help us incorporate interactive and engaging activities that can help our students to be more engaged and facilitate their learning outcomes. Finally, generative AI can also help us generate assignments, quizzes, discussion topics, or discussion board so that we can assess students' learning in the course. So some helpful tools here, I think chatbots in general, for example, ChatGPT, Bard, Cloud, Bing are very helpful. You can simply just ask them, hey, I'm teaching, for example, I'm teaching reliability and validity this week. It's a 3-hour course. Please give me a lesson plan, and it will give you a lesson plan. And then you can ask follow-up questions. For example, you mentioned incorporating engaging activities. Please give me 2 group-based engaging activities for my students to be involved in class, and it will give you some examples. Another tool that I would like to also show is Eduate. I'm not quite so sure how to pronounce it. It's currently free, and my experience with it is it's very helpful when we're talking about education, especially if our doctoral students are helping us in terms of teaching assistant, being a teaching assistant, or they're solo teaching undergraduate or graduate level courses. So this is Eduate. So it have different functions. We can create content. We can have it as an assistant, and we can simply select subjects. Let's say we put in social studies, and we can look in grades. Now they're to college level. They don't have anything higher than college level, so that's probably one limitation. And let's say we want to create a lesson plan that involves 5 E's, which is evidence-based learning lesson plans. We include engagement, explore, explain, elaborate, evaluate. And let's say we are talking about, we want to cover measurement, reliability, and validity. We can create it. Okay. Oh, sorry. I don't know if you can see it well. Let me see if I can make it larger. So you can see that it creates a full lesson plan for us, including engaging, that spend 5 minutes, potential activities we can do, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. So some assessments we can do, and then closure. And they also give you other different alternatives that we can do. And we can actually add more unit plans. We can also create, let me think, what else are here? They also have modules that you can create quizzes, so on and so forth. So this tool is fairly helpful if we're thinking about starting from scratch, trying to brainstorm the courses that we are planning for the spring. Okay, so when we're incorporating artificial intelligence or generative AI in our teaching, we also help students learning. So for example, generative AI can be very helpful when we're thinking about promoting students' self-learning, student engagement, and further application in terms of what they learned in the class. And one thing I found most relevant is self-learning. When I was in my doctoral program, I still remember our doctoral director told us that we're already all doctoral students. We don't really need to take a specific course to learn a specific statistical analysis. That's what Googles are for, my colleagues are for, the mentors are for, and textbooks or books are for. And ChatGPT or generative AI just make self-learning way more easier. An example here is that let's say I have a data set that is a sociometric network data set, and I want to answer a certain research question, and it violates the assumption of hierarchical linear modeling. And I know that multiple membership, multi-level modeling may be suitable for this to answer this research question, but I've never learned that. So what I can do is that I can ask ChatGPT, or in this case, Google Bard, in terms of what is multiple membership multi-level modeling, give me some examples, and give me some code. As you can see here, I first asked about what is multiple membership multi-level modeling. And it gave me introduction of that, and even tells me what data set it can or data structure it can apply to. I then asked a follow-up question, please give me an example of multiple membership multi-level modeling. It's very nice. It actually gave me two examples, and I recognized the second example, the patient and doctor connection example, because that's the example that utilized by a group of researchers in University of Bristol when they're explaining multiple membership multi-level modeling. And then I asked them to give me data codes because I'm more familiar with data. And that's the statistical package I have. It actually create some variables for me, not data set, but variables, and give me a sample code that I can modify. Does it mean that this replace statisticians? No. What I'm trying to say here is that it facilitates my initial learning. I can start learning some concepts. I can start playing around with my data set, use whatever is provided here, and I can get some preliminary findings, and then I will verify it and confirm it with my statisticians. So that's how I think generative AI can be a good start, can be very helpful in terms of facilitate learning, self-learning. And these are basically for students, how they can utilize generative AI for. And this is retrieved from the UNC Generative AI training modules, module 3, the second section. As you can see here, for students, AI can serve as mentors, can serve as tutor, can serve as a peer, can provide scenarios and simulators. And we have some example prompts included here, so students can modify it or for their own personal use to improve their learning. So we've talked a lot about different areas that generative AI can be utilized for, and we're going to address the big elephant in the room, that is the limitations, caveats, and concerns of using generative AI in research, in teaching, or in higher education in general. So the first limitations or caveats I would say is intellectual property issues. We do not know the process through which generative AI tools generate outputs. It's behind the curtains. We don't know the algorithm. We don't know what data set they're using. So it can be hard to verify whose works the AI tool utilized to generate those outputs. Using those outputs can violate other people's intellectual properties. And there are actually multiple suits now filed by multiple parties, including New York Times, artists, and writers against AI companies for using their works to train AI without their permission. Another way to think about it, if I want to utilize generative AI for my manuscripts in terms of editing and providing feedback, I will need to upload my manuscripts even in draft format onto the AI tools. My manuscript draft, in a sense, is in public domain and can be utilized for training AI tools. Can I still publish the paper? Journals usually requires the submitted works to be original, right? Does it still consider original? When I'm doing literature review and I'm trying to summarize multiple papers, can I simply just upload those papers for AI tools to summarize? What if the papers are not open access papers and we have access to those papers simply because we are affiliated with higher education institutions? Using generative AI without double checking its validity, not fact checking it, may also increase the chance for perpetuating disinformation or false information. This is especially true when certain tools can be hard to verify. For example, ChatGPT. It's not connected with the internet, so we don't know what sources it's from. Bing and Google Bard, on the other hand, are connected with the internet, so make referencing and citing or checking easier. It will tell you, hey, where these are from. But that's just relatively easier. Using tools in our research can also create issues regarding, and not just research, teaching as well, and students utilizing it can create issues regarding plagiarism. But when we're trying to do our due diligence to cite our works, but when part of the work is developed by AI or supported by AI, should we simply cite the tool, or should we find the original sources when it cannot be traced? Again, it's still behind the curtain in terms of how they come up with those outputs. Again, AI is as good as the data set it got trained on or the algorithm it's being developed based on. If the data set or the algorithm is biased, relying on AI tools output solely will enhance stereotypes, racism, sexism, and xenophobia. For example, let's say if I'm using a text-to-image AI tool, such as Bing Image Creator, and I want to create an image of a lawyer. Most pictures may depict a light skin tone male. And when we're keep seeing those patterns, what may be imprinted in our perceptions? That's something that we will need to be very careful of. And finally, data security, confidentiality, and privacy. Most of us are working with differentialized or vulnerable populations. Myself, I work with youth experiencing homelessness or individuals experiencing homelessness. And the data we collected from vulnerable population tend to be sensitive, for example, survival sex engagement, firearm violence exposure, and HIV risk behaviors, so on and so forth. we should be really careful in terms of uploading data set onto AI tools for analysis purposes. It is very different when we are asking the chatbot, I have a longitudinal sociometric network data, and I will want maybe the appropriate data analytical approach to analyze this data set to answer certain research question, versus asking chatbot that, hey, here's the data set. Please analyze it for me with the DV dependent variable being X and the independent variable being Y. So those are the gray lines or the ethical concerns that we should be very care about. And finally, here's an example in terms of the potential perpetration of or exacerbation of biases through generative AI. So a group of people at Bloomberg Technology Plus Equality, they did some testing on a text-to-image tool called Stable Diffusion, and they published this called Humans Are Biased, Generative AI is Even Worse. And what they did is that they type into different occupations and see what images are being generated. And they found that when the occupation is of higher income, it's more likely to be lighter skin tone male. If it's lower income, it's more likely to be darker skin tone individuals. They did the same thing on based on gender. They found the similar patterns. Male are more likely to be included in pictures or images that are higher income professions or occupations like CEO and doctors, while women are more likely to be depicted in lower income occupations. So when we see this, as a trained social worker or researcher, we have two ways to interpret it. One, it exacerbates stereotypes, or we can say that, hey, this actually is a reflection of our society. It really highlights the disparities people are facing, so we should address that. But if you think about it, these graphs that I'm showing here are actually people already summarize it and present it by people in Bloomberg Technology and Equality. When we're the user of Stable Diffusion, what we see is what we type and what comes out. So if we keep seeing CEOs being Caucasian male, what does that tell us? For an untrained eye, for the general publics, or for children and youth who's doing school assignments and trying to generate a loyalty-free pictures for their presentation. So that's something that we need to be very careful of. And we're not sure why there are disparities. Is it because of the data set in itself is biased, or is it because of the algorithm is biased? Is still behind the curtain. We don't know. So that's the reason why we want to be extra careful. The group actually compare what they found with the Bureau of Labor data. So they found actually disparities that can be rebuted from factual data. So women make up 39% of doctors, but only 7% of the images they generated, doctor images they generated, are female. So there's 32% discrepancies between the fact and the images they generated. So we've been told a lot in terms of don't trust the internet, don't trust everything on the internet. And if we should be careful about what is floating on the internet, we should also be skeptical of what generative AI spilled out to us. And this is my citation. So I'm utilizing Gamma and for the formatting in terms of the template. I remove all the pictures they provided because I don't know if it's loyalty free or not, or is it for commercial use or not. So I use the stocked pictures from Microsoft PowerPoint. And the prompt or the function I'm using is text to slides function. So thank you very much. And here's if you have any questions. Okay, stop sharing.
Yeah, let's open it up. We do have a little time for questions. So would anyone like to start us out?
I have a general comment and maybe sort of an embedded question, if that's okay, if we have time.
Of course.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for this incredibly interesting and informative presentation. I thought it was very comprehensive and quite intriguing, so thank you for that. Long story short, I run a community engagement and stakeholder research module for CTSA here at Stony Brook Medicine. I'm George Leibowitz. Nice to meet you. And one of the innovations for this CTSA, for this Translational Science Initiative, is developing, among other things, chatbots and bots for scalable health dissemination to leverage disparities. And the other is these stakeholder in the loop approaches that, to your point about generative AI and biases, that tries to leverage the algorithms by incorporating community-based advisory boards, patients, clinicians, stakeholders, so nothing gets garbage in, garbage out, so to speak. I think you were talking about in terms of the algorithms. And the caveats that you mentioned, I think, are very important in terms of when models fail like this around bias and trustworthiness and adaptability. It raises serious ethical questions for us. So I guess embedded maybe for us for discussion is to say, how can social work doc programs like us in training and teaching research methods using these approaches say, okay, so we have some innovations around ensuring that we address the AI biases, and there's lots of literature now around these biases, do stakeholder in the loop kinds of approaches that are at the heart of social work research, using qualitative methods to say that doesn't make sense, it doesn't connect with our community in quite the same way. And we involve Native American communities and many other communities to vet the models. Do you have a thought about the movement afoot that helps leverage some of these biases? Are they successful? I don't know how people using them, but we have some grants in to try to test these models in social work. Sorry for the long question.
No, I think that's really insightful comments and questions. I totally agree in terms of community stakeholder engagement. The tool that I show, the AID AI, that tool is being developed through the input and engagement of educators or teachers. So it's more user-friendly for teaching purposes. I recently just utilized it, so I'm not quite so sure in terms of the biases. But I would say that generative AI, there's still, it's new, it's progressing, and people are now really focusing on the potential ethical concerns that it has. And I don't have a good answer for that. I do think that it's critical to have community stakeholders to be engaged. For example, when we're talking about developing a predictive model I'm more familiar with homeless related research, so I'm going to use that as an example to connect people with housing appropriately, more efficiently, more fairly, right? Then we want to get idea from people with lived experience of homelessness in terms of what's considered a successful exit of homelessness. How do you define a success? And then go back to the data set in terms of, well, the data may tell a different story, and what may be the potential biases of the data? How do we tweak the algorithm so that we can maintain fairness while at the same time making sure that we achieve the goal in terms of achieving the successful outcomes? There are now some tools are saying that they're more they abide by the moral constitution. For example, Cloud 2, they said that they are abiding by what's called a moral constitution. I'm not quite really sure what that means. It's supposed to give you a more moral responses. But there's a researcher did a study that asking about the research focus is about body image in terms of like people after eating they throw up, right? This is a condition they're looking at. So they ask different chatbots in terms of how to do that. What's the practice of that? So even though some chatbot will say that, hey, that's not a good thing to do, and you should consult with your doctor, then it will give step by step, like really detailed steps how to make yourself throw up. So I think there's still a long way to go. And I do think that community overwatch is definitely needed in terms of the insight. But I don't want to like put too much like shade on generative AI. I also want to highlight that because it's so powerful, it can serve as a good tool or opportunities when we're trying to utilize it to address some potential disparities. For example, more of generative, not generative AI, but more of general AI. For example, if we can utilize AI to identify some food desert in the community, and we can utilize generative AI or AI to optimize mobile groceries, the route to go through those neighborhoods so that people will have access to fresh food to address food security or disparities. That's a good use of generative AI. So I think it depends on how it poses, again, opportunities and also potential barriers and concerns. And that's a really a great area that we're trying to figure out. I don't think I'm answering the question, but
You did a wonderfully balanced response, and I really appreciate that. The take-home point is that we have a goal to reduce amplifying the biases and reducing the likelihood of those biases by having representation in lived experience. It doesn't account for all of it, but it accounts for what's behind the curtain, as you describe. So
yeah.
Thank you for a very balanced response.
Thank you.
Who's next? Rohini.
Hi, Hsun-Ta, it's good to see you.
Hey, good to see you.
Just a question about from the perspective of our students. I know you talked about multiple different platforms, and I'm going to ask a question which is interesting because so which platform would you recommend we start with? And I know the question is a little bit about kind of like asking which statistical software you would prefer. But since you've already talked about some disparities where some are paid, some are free, and we can't in good conscience advocate for students using multiple paid platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to actually thinking about advocating or starting somewhere with respect to training and exposure, which one would you recommend?
That's a very good question. So there's a lot of tools that are definitely not free. I would say that my personal experiences is that I try to refrain myself of using ChatGPT, even though it's the most dominant one, simply because ChatGPT 3.5 versus ChatGPT 4 is, there's a huge disparity. I mean, one is performed way better than the other. And the issue mainly for ChatGPT is that you cannot verify its findings. It does not provide citations. You can ask it to provide citations. It will really fabricate a citation for you, which is not true. And there's actually a lawyer being punished because it's, that lawyer is utilizing generative AI, ChatGPT to come out with courses that is totally non-existent. I tend to use Bing and Google Bard or Cloud 2. So Bing is really good in terms of they have multiple format you can use. You can choose the creative format or precise format. The creative format, basically you are using ChatGPT 4. They are based on ChatGPT 4 platform. So if you're using Bing, you're in some way utilizing ChatGPT 4. Google, it has its own issues, but it's keep improving in terms, and it also help you to verify. Now it has a new function. You can actually click on their statement and it will give you verifications in terms of whether the statement is true or not and give you some references. So I tend to like those. And again, I think human as an expertise in our own research area or in our teaching for your students as well, they're doing certain topics, certain projects, they should be the expert in those areas and they should verify it and double check for those findings. In terms of literature review, there's a tool that I didn't cover that's called, but I included in the slides, that's called Research Rabbit. That one is free. So I would encourage people to utilize it. It will connect you with, it will come up with like a social network graph, but connect you with different papers and different researchers so you can dig deeper. So that one I would probably go for that route. Other than that, I really like, as you can see, the example I provide, I just be really amazed by the Elicit. And Elicit will give you some token, and I believe every month it will refresh it. So as long as you're refrain abusing it, I think we're good to go. And again, I think higher education, and we are discussing about it in our committee meeting, the university level committee meeting, is that higher education, there are enterprise licensures now coming out. So higher education institutions, what kind of licensures they would like to purchase so that all students will have access to it and utilize those, and we can have IT supports on those. I think that's something we're still discussing among the committee members in terms of which one we should test it out, pilot test it out, so we can determine which one to buy, and how do we promote student use for those, and faculty and staff member use for those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions?
I was going to wait for everybody else to ask their questions, but I have a really quick one to ask you. First, let me thank you so much. This was really incredibly helpful. I'm actually curious, like, about you, how you got it, how you're interested in social problems and social work and social issues, but also in this rapidly moving train of artificial intelligence. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the future of this in our profession, and specifically in doctoral education. Do we all need one of you on our faculty?
So that's a really good question. So I will start with why I'm doing this work. So my original research interest is more about health promotion among individuals experiencing homelessness. And so in one study, we found that, youth experiencing homelessness, they are extremely vulnerable to multiple adverse health outcomes. For example, HIV risks, for example, substance use, and also firearm violence exposure, right? So we all try to develop interventions to promote their health outcomes. And one thing we noticed that homeless individuals experiencing homelessness and youth experiencing homelessness specifically are transient. We probably will be able to capture them one time in drop-in centers. We probably will not, they will not show up for the second sessions most of the time. So that really hinder us in terms of delivering effective interventions to this vulnerable population. But what they have is smartphone. What they have is engagement in social media. And so that really triggered me and they're really savvy. They know they don't have a internet plan, but they know where to get internet. They know as long as they are close to McDonald's, they have free access to internet, right? So how do we utilize that? They're already savvy with technology. How do we utilize that as a potential venue to promote their health outcomes? And plus, sometimes they don't want to talk with their provider. Sometimes they don't want to talk about their peers. Chatbot actually provides certain privacy that can help them to disclose certain sensitive topics. So that really intrigued me. How do we utilize chatbot? How do we utilize artificial intelligence informed chatbot to provide accurate information better than just Google it, provide accurate medical information, connect them with resources? How do we utilize those interactions to nudge them into having access to services they need? So that's why I'm very interested in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments?
I have a question. Thank you for this presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Forward, I'm a bit of a skeptic, right? About technological advancements. Of course, I don't want to give up my automobile for the horse and buggy, right? But as we go forward, how do we control, manage some of the ethical dilemmas? You know, as human beings, of course, are mischief sometimes, and we cheat sometimes. So what are some of the major ethical dilemmas that we can anticipate, and how can we handle them as we move forward? Again, I appreciate your presentation.
This is actually a very good question, and we are still trying to figure out. I'm sorry that I don't have a definite answer to that, because literally in our community, in our committee, we're talking about that exact issue. We can have the best guidance provided to students. We can have a really strict policies provided to students. Students can choose to utilize generative AI to produce whatever they would like to produce, and not letting us know, not disclosing it. There are tools that can be utilized to detect generative AI outputs, right? But studies have already shown that that will bias towards people whose English is second language. So people like me, even though I'm writing my own stuff, I'm more likely to be found to utilize generative AI because the way I'm writing, the way I convey my ideas. So that's the reason why we don't encourage people to utilize those tools, because the bias built into it. So really, it's more about an honor system. How do we build that value or ethic into our students or into ourselves, for example? I think that's the hard part. We don't have a really good answer for that. And I think that what the example that I provided, the Bloomberg example, is to call people out, not people, but like call those AI out when we, as an expert in those area, that we identify disparities. We demonstrate those disparities, those biases. I'm pretty sure if we are asking the same questions again, they're going to come up with different pictures, because now attentions are on those. So again, it need a community's efforts in terms of, I always tell myself, not everybody is like social workers being trained to be sensitive in terms of disparities, prejudice. So as social work students, social work educators, playing a critical role to identify those biases and call those out and disseminating those informations, and that's something we can do.
Thanks much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, we have just a few more minutes. No, we actually have about 10, but what else do people want to discuss? Going once, going twice. All right, well, please join me in thanking Hsun-Ta for this presentation. I learn more every time I hear him, and I am just grateful for his expertise and his clarity in sharing it. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right, we will see you all next time.
Thank you.
And thanks for your attendance.